Hello and welcome to the Chorosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 260, The World is Your Chorister, with Jonas Rasmussen. Many choir directors share warm-ups now on the internet and other activities in the form of video clips, but few have gained as much traction as Jonas Rasmussen. Tune in to find out why, and go behind the scenes and in depth on these exciting exercises that he is sharing, and get to know Jonas a little bit. You may know him as the choir conductor on Instagram, but in this episode, Jonas, who is from Denmark, joins the podcast to discuss his journey in choral music more broadly and what led him to start posting these videos. We also discuss the cultural differences in choral practices between Denmark and the United States and his innovative approach to these warm-ups. The conversation delves into the challenges of choral conducting education in Denmark and the importance of embracing failure in rehearsals and the unique Danish tradition of communal singing from the folk high school songbook. Jonas and I also explore the concept of blend in choral music towards the end and how that might be different in his country than in mine and how we think about that. So stick around and listen all the way to the end. And then, of course, weigh in yourself over on the Chorosopher's Facebook page with your ideas and sparked comments from this episode and let us know what you think. I'm not sure how much, if anything, out there has not gone up in price since 2020, but I know one thing that hasn't, and that is the membership to the Patreon and to the Substack to support this show. The people who are signed up over there as paid subscribers, as my thank you to them, they can get things like t-shirts from the chorosophy.com shop. They can also get access to my Google folder of teaching materials that I've talked about on the show for over the years. And of course, they just want to help make sure that this show can continue. And one of those benefits is a shout out on the show. Shout outs for the Inner Circle and producer tiers over on Patreon. We have Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Rebecca Chalk, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Jonas Rasmussen, and Jonas is a choral director from Denmark, and I've had a chance to meet him in person at some conventions, and he is a very tall man, but on the podcast you won't be able to see that. But we're going to be talking about some choir warm-ups, which are really taking the internet by storm, and we're also going to be talking about a little bit of a comparison and contrastion, which is not a word, between our countries in the way that we operate in choral music spaces. So Jonas, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's really an honor to be on this podcast. You know, I've been a listener since it started, actually, back in, was it
2019? That's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, out of the audience for years and onto the show. It's about time. I should have asked you sooner. I didn't realize you were listening since the very beginning. You had mentioned to me at a convention that you listened, and I do remember meeting you, but that's really cool that you caught it right from the beginning. Now, I'm curious, though, because you mentioned since you started listening, how did you hear about it back in 2019?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it might have just been some Facebook post you've made.
Okay.
In some Facebook group, and I was interested. I already did listen to some choral podcasts, and I tried yours out, and I just stuck with it.
Okay, great.
I don't. How many episodes are you on to now? Like 200 something?
You will actually go on as episode 260.
Right. I think I might have listened to like 100 of those.
But there's even more than that. Yeah, it's because I haven't even given all of them a number, so it's really more like 320 or something like that.
But it's a great job you're doing, and I'm really appreciative of it because it's, I really enjoy listening to it myself.
Well, good. I'm so glad. It means a lot, and I'm excited to chat with you. So why don't you kind of dive in here by telling us more about you so that the audience can get a sense of who you are in terms of what got you into choral music as a young lad, and then also what do you do every day? I'm assuming you do more than just put up Instagram videos of choir warm-ups. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up here in Aarhus, Denmark, and I started out playing piano, as many children do. And then I joined the boys' choir in the cathedral here. And I got into conducting and choral music, obviously. And I thought I was not going to be a concert pianist because that was just way too lonely, and I just realized I could never be as good as I wanted to be. So I did conducting instead. And in Denmark, you actually cannot do a bachelor's degree in choral conducting. So you have to go somewhere else. And so I applied to the conservatory in Stockholm, and luckily I got in there as a 21-year-old, and I came up there and experienced the whole heritage of Eric Erickson and that whole Swedish choral tradition, the wonderful, wonderful environment there for choral music. And I was there for 3 years, and then I stumbled upon this guy called Stephen Layton, who is a British choral conductor. He was in Stockholm doing a wonderful, wonderful project with the Eric Erickson Chamber Choir. And I just thought, I need to study with this man. He was just incredible. So I moved to Cambridge and did my master's at the University of Cambridge with Stephen as my mentor and teacher. And then I moved back to Aarhus. So I've been here for the past 8 years. And currently I conduct 2 ensembles. I have my youth choir, which consists of about 45 singers, ages from 15 to 25, so quite a broad span. And then I have my adult choir, also mixed, around 32 singers. And then I teach choral conducting at the Royal Academy here. So that's kind of the main positions that I hold to this date. And then 6 months ago, I started uploading a couple of videos to Instagram, and it really took off.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it really did. So I knew that I wanted to share some of the things that we do in our rehearsals. So I went to my choir's board and asked them if it was okay. I put up a camera, just a phone, and I think they were actually they laughed a little bit about me. Do you really think somebody would care what we do here? And yeah, let me just try it. I'll try it. I'll record some of the warm-ups and just put them online. And then I think the third video I put out just went really viral. And yeah, so I kind of just went all in on that and have been spending a lot of time for the last 6 months on Instagram.
That's awesome. And so when you were first going to make those, the first idea came to set up the camera in your rehearsal, was the original idea to focus on warm-ups, or were you just going to record random stuff?
Actually, I knew with my youth choir, I knew that we had something going on that I wanted to share with the world. I think we've done some things in the choir that I know my colleagues would appreciate knowing about. So I started out with this idea of filming a small documentary, just following like a day of rehearsal. But it always gets complicated when you need the singers' faces on the camera, and you need permission from everybody, and everybody needs to say this is okay. So it wasn't really viable to do that. It might come in the future, but the easy way was just to put up a camera facing me, no singers on the video, and just, you still get the feel for what is going on in the room, even though you don't see the singers, but you can absolutely see that they're having fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, I do have, before we get into those warm-ups, I do have a question from your story there that I just got a curiosity that was sparked. You mentioned that in your country, you can't get a bachelor's degree in choral conducting or an undergraduate degree. So my curiosity was, what would be the closest thing you could get in Denmark to, like, what does a choral interested music student do unless they leave the country like you did?
So there are 2 different options where you can get some choral conducting experience as an undergrad here. The first one is to study church music, so to study to be an organist. There you will have choral conducting as a side subject for 3 years. Or you can study to become a music pedagogue, I think would be the translation. So to go out and teach music, basically. In that specific line of education, you have to master a lot of different skills, and choral conducting will be one of them. And actually it's split up into classical choral conducting and more pop, jazz-related choral conducting. So those are 2 different subjects.
I see.
It's not really specialized at all. But you do get some choral conducting education.
That's interesting. Yeah, it always fascinates me how different all of our countries are and how we educate our musicians. I've spoken now to people from all over the world and everywhere is just a little bit different. So thank you for filling in those gaps for me now. That helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
let's
Jonas,
come back to those differences.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure we will. Yeah. So let's jump into some of these warm-ups first. And so what I would like to do, I'm going to share my screen so that not only you, but the people listening at home, in case they have not, or wherever people listen, have not seen your Instagram, they're going to hear the audio, or if they're watching the video version of this, they'll see the video. And then I've got some questions for you after we're done watching the video. Is that okay?
For sure. Let's go.
Let's do it. In this clip, you will hear sounds from Jonas's choir. If you can't see the video, then you will see him conducting using different gestures to bring about these different sounds, including claps and vocal sounds.
God samtidighed. Nice. I siger krav. Lidt mere. Bra. Det er hurtig reaktion.
And then I love that. So in that one, how would you explain kind of how did you get to that activity? Is it something that you evolved gradually? What are some of the things that we would not see in that video that would have led up to you doing that as an exercise with your group?
Right. So let me start with the context of this specific warm-up session. This summer, we had the European Choir Games in our city of Aarhus. And the youth choir who was in the video was competing, and this was actually on the competition day. So it was the very last rehearsal before we were going in to compete. So the tension was quite high in the room. And you can also see the blue wristband that I wear in the video is like the festival band. It brings back great memories because we ended up winning that competition, which was great fun. But you can also see the 45 people in that room are really wanting to be so much in sync. So the energy is high in the room, and they really want to go there with me.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So what most people don't realize about these Instagram videos is that most of the things I put up is improvised. And this one was as well.
Okay.
I do think a little bit about what do we want to achieve. And obviously the goal here is synchronization. So how to do that, we'll see. When I'm standing there in front of them, the first things that comes to mind is just to clap in sync. And that's an exercise we've done many times. But then I just thought, what if we try to connect that with my conducting as well?
Right.
The thing we were working on at the time was some jazz, up-tempo jazz, and we did not quite get in sync at the right time, or some things were falling a little bit apart. So we needed some kind of connection from the one end of the ensemble to the other end of the ensemble, and obviously the thing that needs to connect them is the conductor. So it was an exercise for them to be able to watch me and be completely in sync.
Yeah, that's incredible. What about so one of the things I like about your videos in general is that they have text that you've put across the bottom, usually of kind of some narration of what it is that you're trying to achieve during that time, which just from a nerdy pedagogical standpoint is very helpful, because for the person that's watching the video who may be obviously with as many followers as you've racked up, not every person who sees the video is going to be a choir teacher. They're sometimes going to be just people who are interested in music, or they just think it comes across their page at all. So you're doing a good job of kind of explaining the value of it. My interest there would be like some of the syllables you chose, like was it just an improvised random kra and ka, or is there a meaning to those syllables at all?
No, not at all. I mean, bra means good in Swedish, but not really. I wanted something with a clear precision, and k in K has it has the same as a clap, really, like that 1 point. And then I thought, what would happen if sometimes the difficulty of the synchronization comes with the consonants, and especially different consonants in succession. So one of the things that are most difficult is to have a long krr, because is it on the beat? Is it before the beat? When are we actually supposed to sing? So I tried just to find that sweet spot where the krr comes before the beat and the comes on the beat. And that was the exercise. And I actually think we didn't really succeed at that in this exercise. So that might be something I work more on a later time. But that was my reasoning.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you had said that you had, in the past, before that video, you had done clapping synchronization, but in that video, the goal was to try to attach it to your conducting. And I think that's interesting, just an interesting concept. Of course, in my classroom and with my choirs, my student choirs in particular, I do very similar things in terms of trying to almost like trick them in some ways, kind of like you were doing in that video, or making trick them maybe is the wrong word, but causing them to have to use critical thinking,
completely right word.
Show when you are going to actually bring that beat down, so to speak, and they have to think ahead and try to line things up as a group. And of course, we all want our musicians to hear the music very accurately in their head as they're singing, playing, or whatever. But ultimately, the conductor's job is to make sure that any discrepancies of that internal audiation go away when the gesture happens. So what, like in the past, prior to that, what types of exercises had you done to do the clap synchronization? Do you have any favorites other than the conducting gesture thing?
Synchronization is a lot of things. I mean, for timing synchronization, I love claps, and exactly for that reason, that it's just they're so pointy. The sound is just so pointy. You can really hear if something is not completely in sync. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also you have to commit to a clap. Like there is no hiding really. But in other types of music, for example, if it's groove based, I have a lot of different exercises in kind of like trying to go from a 6/8 feeling to a 3/4 feeling. That kind of a polyrhythm thing is something I return to many, many times during the year, because I think it really feeds the ensemble unity to have that kind of common groove.
Yeah, that makes sense. Since that was kind of an improvised one, if you were to do it again and continue to do that type of activities, would you develop it, or would your mindset be that we just need to get better at that skill, because you mentioned that you didn't think you really had succeeded? So what would be the next step if you were to do it again?
So the funny thing here is, and I really want to talk to you about this, because I see behind you have your thank you for your mistake picture.
Uh-huh.
I often design these exercises to be just to be difficult enough for people to fail. And that is very deliberate.
Yep.
Because I want them to be able to fail. It's really being comfortable with failing and just taking every exercise to the absolute maximum of what they can handle. It's just something I really find much joy in. And I think they do as well. For a beginner in my choir, I think it can be really daunting and really scary to just being thrown into doing all sorts of weird stuff with your voice and your body. But as they get used to it, I think they really appreciate that they are being forced to do something that is not easy. And getting back to your question about this exercise, I think I would just continue on adding stuff that makes it more difficult. So I'm just now improvising again. I would probably turn my back to them and see if they can be as just looking at my muscles at the back. You can actually see something conducting from the back just by watching the muscles. But instead of exactly seeing the fingers, just seeing the back would be interesting. That was something I might try tomorrow.
We all love to travel with our students, but we definitely don't love planning a trip. I know I've been there as the point person for details, and it is a nightmare. Forms, payments, fundraising, it's a never-ending task that takes away from doing what we love. That's where Kaleidoscope Adventures comes in. They've been planning performance trips for more than 30 years and handle all the details from start to finish. And one of the best parts about Kaleidoscope, they have crowdfunding options for every traveler. Contact Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com to find out how they can take your travel beyond expectations. An interesting part of that experiment might be that how much of what we are showing them on our face is actually giving them clues to what we're intending, if that makes sense. And so, like without the face, also that would create a different barrier. Now, yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm glad you brought in brought up the thank you for your mistake poster, because that is a really important part of it. Now, I didn't ask this earlier. I should have. What are the youngest singers that when you say beginners, what age is that?
So officially we go down to 15, but I think the youngest at this moment is 17 or 18.
Right. Okay. So it's youth, teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, in my school, youngest would be 14 typically, and a lot of times they are beginners. And I just had spent last week having them sing by themselves in private so that I could assess them for the first time. And one of the things that comes up a lot is that we get, like, let's say there's a kid who's really nervous in general about just singing in front of people. I will usually ask them, what is the really bad thing that you're worried will happen if you sing? And usually I get something like, well, I'll make a mistake. And I will tell them, I actually need you to make a mistake. I'm actually hoping you make mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes, then I don't have much of a job to do. And so I need to see your mistakes so that I can see where they happen, and then I can predict why they happen and try to help you learn how to solve them. And that doesn't work every time. Obviously, kids are still nervous. But that starts to calm them down of like, oh, actually, we're here to try to challenge ourselves, not be perfect the first time. So I love your mindset about that.
It's so much a core of my philosophy to just design every exercise to fail, or to teach them to fail. I think it's something that we need to do way more, all of us, and especially for this younger generation who's on Instagram all the time and sees the perfect life all the time. We need to teach them that failing is a part of the process, and if you don't fail, you will never improve.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. All right, Jonas, let's look at another video. This one is going to be I think the 6 or the number game, where you have like a notated line at warm up along the bottom, and they sing numbers, and then you try to, well, like we just discussed, make it harder as you go. And this is a fascinating one. I love this one. This one I will be doing in my class next week.
Yeah, nice.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11, 12 and 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11, 12 and 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, 7, 8, and 10, 11, 13, 14, 16, 17, 19, 20.
Siste gang.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 7, 8, and 10, 11, and 13, 14.
You hear the mistakes happening, they just keep going.
Yep.
19, 20. 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, 7, 8, and 10,
So that is, I love that one. And now I'm curious. My first question about that one is: did you write it?
No, I
Is that
didn't.
something you composed? Where'd you get that?
This is something I didn't write. I stumbled upon this in Sweden like 10 years ago in a choir I sang in myself. But at that time, it was just unison, and obviously it was in Swedish. So I've kind of just taken the melody and done everything to it, doing
Okay,
the
yeah.
parallel things and coming up with all these different rules. And it's also one of my favorites, something that I really enjoy experimenting with.
Now I'm assuming that because of the parts and the different, like there's an alto part, there's a soprano part, tenor, bass, etc., that this video is not the first time your choir had ever done this one. Is that true?
No, this is something we return to now and again.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So you would have to, thinking about the person listening to this and like, ooh, I want to try that one with my choir. You would need to teach them the parts. I would assume get fairly fluent with it before you start messing with them, so to speak, or I actually
Absolutely.
say throwing wrenches at them.
But it's quite easy to learn this melody.
Yeah, sure.
It's a couple of times, and then they get it.
Yeah. Now, did you add parts gradually? Jump right into 4-part harmony?
I would probably do unison first, and then say sopranos and tenors do the thirds, and just parallel thirds. And if that's nice, I'll bump up the tenors to the fifth instead, and then we have harmony. We've also tried bumping the altos down to the seventh, so we got seventh chords all the way.
Oh, yes.
Which is another challenge, but yeah,
like
just
parallel
parallel major chords is cool.
Yeah. Yes, that would be a challenge. Yeah. So your approach there, it sounds like, is similar to the other type of exercise where your goal isn't for them to do that exercise, even though you return to it. It's not to do it the same way every time. It's to take some type of familiar harmonic and melodic structure, but then ask them to kind of in unpredictable ways make changes that, again, generate the possibility of a little bit of a failed test. Is that about right?
It's predictable unpredictability.
I love that. Predictable unpredictability. And your singers probably know you're trying to do that to them by now.
Absolutely. They expect it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they know they're gonna be tested in the warm-ups. For many people and choral conductors, the warm-ups are a place where you just come and you sing a couple of some exercises. For me, the warm-up is the time, the first couple of minutes in the rehearsal where we get to be together. We meet once a week, so this is like, it's the best time of the week because we're all back together again. It's fantastic. The room is buzzing, and we just cannot wait to sing the songs that we're working on. And therefore, the energy that I bring to the room should also be reflecting that. And obviously, we need to warm up the voices, but that is not the most important part. The most important part is to create that form of hooray, we're back together, and then, of course, work on our ensemble skills. And I usually go by a pattern that is body, voice, brain. So start out with doing something with the body, stretches, whatever, doing something with the voice, and then doing something with the brain. And they can also be combined, obviously. But you need to cover all those three in your warm-up. And my warm-ups are usually 15 minutes long.
The warm-up portion of your rehearsal is about 15. Is that what you're saying? Okay, that's great. What about, now I think I have a feeling I know the answer to this question, but I want you to spell it out and to give us your perspective. Are you kind of we're going to do a different sequence of 15 minutes warm-up every time? Or do you have kind of set ones that you do every rehearsal? Or would you say it's different every time?
It is definitely different every time.
Mm-hmm. I had a feeling you would say that.
We have one exercise that we do every week, and I haven't put it on Instagram yet. I don't know who owns it. I mean, can you even own an exercise? I'm sure you can. But this one is just shake your right hand 5 times, left hand 5 times, right foot, shake 5 times. Yeah. And then back 4 times. And it has become kind of a meme in the choir, in that sense that, when you're getting into the warm-up, we're doing this exercise and then we're ready. It's kind of like,
it's like a signal.
Let's go. Yeah, it's a signal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I really mix it up, and I really always try to think about what repertoire we are working on. So it's not just to have fun and play and, all of that. I really try to find some skills that we need to work on in the repertoire that we're singing. And that can be, that could be anything. That could be timing, that could be difficult intervals, like really specific intervals that are difficult. I will make up an exercise to kind of work on that. It could also be tuning in general. If we have like a very difficult chord, it's like a minor 7 B5 something, I will make an exercise where we sing that chord over and over again in all the keys and just get familiar with the sound. And when we then stumble upon it in the repertoire, it will be the easiest thing. So that is something I do not improvise. That is something I think about. What are the challenges for today's rehearsal?
Yeah. It sounds like our philosophies on that are very similar. I actually would go one step towards encouraging or cautioning even colleagues to not do too much warm-ups that are the same, exactly the same, do not change, do not function any differently from week to week or day to day, because once we do that to our students, to our singers, even adults, it just becomes meaningless. If they're not thinking about it anymore, they've done it so much that it's just rote, then they are phoning it in, so to speak. And so I love that you have some things that they know well and that they can use as a signal to get started, but you're also constantly keeping them guessing.
I have a video coming out in, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I think, which will probably be out when this episode is out, which I call something along the lines of change one note, change your life, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Because we do just a normal voice warm-up, very, very simple melody. I think it's something like that. And then I just ask the singers to change one of those notes to something else. And then it goes to hell, basically. Just, as you said, because it becomes a reflex, it becomes autopilot. And suddenly when we throw that away, we are left with something that we cannot really recognize. And it becomes extremely difficult. I mean, if you just do the 2 to a B2, kind of nerdy, but this is a nerdy podcast, but or something like that. It could just be, what are we going to do with that? Everybody's faces will go like, what is happening? I've lost all my ability to sing. I thought I was a good singer. But then just the smallest changes can have a very big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I love that. All right, let's do it. Let's do one more. We're doing 6/8.
Yep.
Following the conducting gesture here.
Apple and pineapple, 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 apple. Apple and pineapple, apple and pineapple, apple and pineapple, apple. And pineapple, apple and pineapple, apple and pineapple, apple
It's a
and
great
pineapple.
conducting exercise for the conductor, too.
It is.
And pineapple, apple and pineapple, apple and pineapple. Apple, apple and pineapple, apple and pineapple.
Apple and pineapple, 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 apple and
modulate, etc. That's just awesome. Now, I love that one. Now, that's another one I'm going to use in class. So, did you before that video had they practiced those melodic sequences to put with those words, or was this all improvised
No,
on the spot?
this was not improvised, actually. I made this exercise on the day just before I went to rehearsal.
Okay. So the choir hadn't
Really?
practiced it.
No. They didn't
Okay.
know anything about it. I cannot really remember what I was trying to achieve with it. It was something that we did not actually end up using. I think my point was to use the P's in apple and pineapple, apple and pineapple, to get that sort of offbeat sense in a 6/8 time signature. But then it just went somewhere completely else. But it was fun nonetheless.
Yes, but I can see tons of reasons to do it now. I mean, just like
absolutely.
it's actually in a lot of ways it's a similar. It could approach the synchronization thing in the clapping video in a very similar concepts of just getting the choir used to. I love like how the cutoffs in the middle of a phrase. I think a lot of 6/8 repertoire does that, because especially in vocal music where you have to breathe as a group and go on in an intuitive way that still keeps the phrase alive. So it'd be a great drill for that. Not only
Absolutely.
that, but just also getting singers used to like kind of taking a preparatory breath and being ready to sing when they're not sure exactly when they're going to, those types of things. Is that one you think you'll do again for any purpose?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe not with those singers, but definitely with other groups. I could see myself use that again.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's great. I can see. Well, for example, even just teaching young singers what 6/8 feels like, because they're so like, I'm in a position where I'm thinking about how this would function in my classroom, because I'm in a position of teaching kids to do this kind of thing that are not trained musicians. So they don't have any kind of musical background at all. So if it's for many of my students, I would be introducing the feeling of 6/8 time for the first time and giving them something kinesthetic and something something linguistic that will feel like that rhythm would be very valuable. And then they also maybe don't have experience following a conductor. So that could be a great exercise. And as I mentioned, a good exercise for me too, to make sure my gesture is clear and
I
all of
think
that.
it might be an exercise I would bring to my students at the Royal Academy for a conducting exercise.
Yes.
Because I think it would be brilliant for that purpose. It's really difficult, actually, to stop on every subdivision and then to get going again from the next subdivision. So I could definitely see myself use that for that purpose. But I mean, all of these exercises are just, if you think you could have fun with them, just go out and play with them, and maybe you will use it for something else. I mean, I think we should be better as a whole, just taking something, being inspired by it, and then using it in our own way. That is basically what I do all the time, just getting inspired and maybe even stealing a little bit, but I really don't consider it stealing because I'm just giving it away for free afterwards. And yeah, adjusting to your own level and to the singers as well.
Oh,
So
I totally
important.
agree. Okay, Jonas, I have a question for you. I'm assuming, because I'm going to assume that you know more about how our two countries function differently with choral music than I do, because I know you've been to mine and I have not been to yours. So we're going to start there. Like, what are some of your observations about how maybe the life of a person who does what we do for a living might be different, and the trajectories of our lives different based on just how choir is different in those our two countries?
Yeah, there are many points to touch. I think starting with the structure of how the choirs are organized would be the most important part. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these points, but I've been to the US 5 times and I love being there, but I don't know everything, obviously, about choral life in the US. But it seems to me like many choirs are organized in institutions in the US, like universities, schools, churches, also quite a lot of professional groups as well. In Denmark, most choirs are not attached to any institution. I actually don't think we have any official university choirs in Denmark. We
Really?
definitely have some official high school choirs, but it's not really a focus for the educational system to promote choral music. It's very much something we do at our extracurricular time. So that's why some people have commented on my Instagram videos because they can see the clock on the wall and it always says something like 2 minutes to 7, and they assume it's in the morning because they assume it's a school setting, but it's actually in the evening. So my choirs always meet in the evenings, and I think most choirs do. Aarhus is the size of approximately Pittsburgh in the US. It's like 300 to 350,000 inhabitants. And we have 150 choirs here, but very, very few are attached to any organization.
That's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And especially because you said earlier that, or we talked earlier about the limited types of choral music training in universities for students. How do you train to be a church music director, for example, in a university if there is no choir for you to use there as you're learning? Like, how do they do that? So I know, like, for me, the choir was right there, and I was learning about choir from the choir that was right there on campus. So how does that function there?
Yeah. So for those who are studying church music and the music pedagogues, they have choral conducting at the same time. So they are like maybe 12 to 15 people, and they will be their own choir. They will form a choir by themselves. And occasionally they will invite their friends to come and sing along as well. So it's not like a real choir, but it's like a choir setting.
We have that here too. We call it lab choirs usually.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But there wouldn't be a choir attached to that institution that they could eventually work to kind of take over and direct as an extension of their experience. They would have to go outside of the school.
Yeah, at the master's level, we do have a master's in choral conducting, which is weird since we don't have a bachelor's. But at the master's, the students get to work with a vocal ensemble of 16 singers that are paid to be there every week. So it's a professional choir, but it's not a choir that does concerts by themselves. They are also that kind of lab choir. They are there for the purpose of being the choir for the students.
I see. Okay. So what would be some other differences then that you've noticed?
Obviously, there are major cultural differences. I'll just cover the basics of the choral life in Denmark. We have this songbook that we call the Folk High School Songbook. Is that right? The Folk High School Songbook. It's a little blue book. It contains around 600 songs, Danish and international. And it's the most sold book in all of Denmark. And it is that because every school has to have it, every institution, every church. It's so used everywhere. And if you go to just an elementary school or middle school, they will typically have a morning assembly where they sing 1 or 2 songs, probably from the songbook, and then they will go to do their classes for the rest of the day. So this book is it's really the soul of the Danish tradition or the Danish culture. It contains texts of our best poets, melodies from our best composers, and there's a new edition every 15 to 20 years. The last one came out in 2018. And so what this means is when children graduate from high school, they have been exposed to this form of singing for a long time. So even though they haven't sung in choirs, they know a lot of songs. They might know, a couple of hundred songs from the Danish cultural heritage. And that also means that they have some degree of vocal training. That would be a shame to say vocal training, but they are comfortable with their voice because they've just been using it for their whole life.
That is amazing.
The thing about this songbook is that we're not ever performing when we're singing from the songbook. It's always with the focus on the act of singing together. So the result doesn't matter. It doesn't have to sound good. It doesn't have to be performed for anyone. It's there for everyone to join in. It's the act of singing together that is important.
It's a community building exercise.
Yeah, basically. And companies like the big Danish companies, they would start their board meetings with the song from the songbook, and then they will go on and do the meeting. And it's always with the philosophy that you cannot. It's hard to disagree if you've just sung songs together. Like it creates some
Yeah.
kind of bond that is very hard to break afterwards.
Yeah, that's incredible. I did not know that. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm reflecting on that as a contrast to American singing culture, which is just nowhere near that. I would describe that in elementary schools when I was a kid, it was still very common for American students to be taught a lot of the folk music of the United States, but it's not as very common anymore. And part of that, of course, is that the country is becoming more and more diverse, and not everyone shares the same cultural heritage. And so, in schools, we've had this dissonance for a generation now of like, well, we can't just sing these cultural songs because those don't represent everyone. But then there are so many cultures represented that it's almost like we've given up on trying at all, because like whose culture do we choose? Because if we choose 4 cultures even, then culture 5, 6, and 7 get left out, and you can't sing all the cultures. Right. It's just, it's so diverse. And I imagine that's something unique to the problem of music instruction in the United States, because we kind of are having less and less cultural hegemony in the United States. So that's fascinating to me, because I can't even picture what that would be like. That's a big difference.
But you do sing the national anthem every morning? You do something else?
There is a Pledge of Allegiance.
The Pledge of Allegiance, that's it.
That happens,
But
and
no
that's
singing involved.
that's spoken, and that's like a reciting of a community pledge, essentially, to the flag of the United States is represented there. And that's, there are people who have their issues with that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pretty unquestioned tradition for the most part in the United States. But that's very interesting to me. And so even though there are no choirs in the school is still singing, and are they singing in harmony?
No, sadly
So
not. So the big job for us choral conductors at the moment is trying to not only enhance the singing in the schools, but also bridge the gap between that communal singing, that unison singing, to go over to just tiniest harmony. Because that is a very, very big gap. When people identify something as singing in choir, it suddenly becomes very elitist for some. Like,
Interesting.
I cannot sing, but you've been singing all your life. You love singing these songs. Yeah, but I'm not in a choir. I cannot perform for anyone. So this is a gap that we try to bridge very hard at the moment. And
yeah. So I'm interested to know more about that. So when you say you and your colleagues there are trying to bridge that gap, does that mean you are having conversations with school leaders? Are there like arguments about it? Is it like, hey, we would like to use some of this time to teach the student body to sing in more interesting and complex ways, and you're told no? What does that mean?
So I've been involved in an organization for a lot of years now, it's like an outreach organization. So what I would do is I would go to a school and I would meet up with the music teachers at the school, and I would kind of advise them how to both go from the morning assembly singing to choir singing. How would that even look? Because usually it's the teachers that are very reluctant to make that shift because they don't feel comfortable in instructing a choir. Basically, we're trying to bridge the gap by educating the music teachers even more. That is one thing we do. I don't think there's anybody who's against singing in choirs, but it's always a question of resources and
Right.
priorities.
Yeah. Now, does the songbook itself, is it notated purely in unison lines of music, or does it look like a hymn book?
Do I have it here? It's unison, but with chords. It's
Chord symbols or?
Yeah, chord symbols. Yeah.
Chord symbols. Okay. So is there typically a piano playing along or guitar strumming along, or how does this function at schools?
Typically it would be piano.
Okay.
And the thing is, all the songs are recorded with all its different verses on Spotify. So anybody who wants to sing from this book can just go to Spotify, find the song, and then there will be they will have their accompaniment if they want to. But obviously,
That
it's
makes
always
sense.
best if you can find a real accompanist.
Right, of course. But then resources again
Resources.
comes into play, I'm sure, for some schools. Yeah, for some schools. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. So this is interesting. What about another contrast between our ecosystems that I'm curious about? I know when I've spoken to colleagues from other countries in general, one of the first things that we notice as a contrast is the sheer number, even by proportion. Of course, the United States is a large country, but even the sheer number by proportion of people who can do what I do for a living, which is full-time choir all the time. Like I don't do other job, like I don't have another job. All of my jobs are related to choral music. Whereas in many other countries, I might be a choral director, but I do many other things, other types of music, play the organ at the church, etc. How would you describe where Denmark fits into that spectrum? Is it common to be a full-time choral director for your living
Not
there?
at all. Not at all. So this is the problem again with the lack of institutional support for the choirs,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
that also means that we don't have many full-time positions for choral directors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might have like a handful in Denmark only. Like we have some institutions that have well-renowned choirs, but I'm here in Aarhus, who's maybe the biggest choral city of Denmark, and I cannot really think of a full-time position here, like where you have one institution paying you your full-time fee.
Mm-hmm.
I've had multiple employers at the same time for all of my life because there is no full-time position to take.
Right. Right.
But that doesn't mean there isn't work,
Right.
because there actually is, and especially if you're an entrepreneur and really are going for it, and you're not afraid to build your own projects. There can be a lot of opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
but not in.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's very similar to how in the United States most people who are performers for a living have to function. They have to get multiple employers, and the employer is changing it almost constantly because they've got to get the next gig and then the next gig, and sometimes it's a gig in a musical while they're also in an opera, while they're also singing in a church choir. Where
Yes.
so it sounds like a choral conductor in Denmark is gig hunting almost regularly, or is it more stable than that, do you think?
It is a bit more stable than that, I would say, because
Mm-hmm.
usually you have your choirs. You get a position for a choir, but that choir might be once a week, and then you need to fill out the other hours of the week. And also, it's not really viable to work like 5 nights a week. I mean, it could be, but for other people who are used to working in school hours, it's just not really viable to have that kind of lifestyle in the long run. They do.
That is where your salary comes from, or do you get government funding or a mixture? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have 3 streams of income in our choirs. The first one is the tuition fee, which they pay every semester. It's not a lot of money, but it's a substantial amount for a student, I would say. It would translate to something like, what would that be, 100 US dollars maybe for a semester. And then we also get fees for our concerts. And that is our main financial income stream. So when we go to, and we're lucky in Denmark because the state is still connected to the church, which means that the church is very well funded. But every church in Denmark has a budget for concerts. So usually we reach out, or the churches reach out to us to just hear if we can come and sing a concert, and we're happy to. So we go there and we get a substantial amount of money from a concert. And when I've kind of compared that with other countries, this is something very special for Denmark. And even in the Scandinavian countries, the reason why this can work in Denmark is only because the church and the state is connected in the way they are. And the third income stream is from government funding and funding from other stipends. There's also some kind of, what is that called? If a huge company in Denmark has a lot of profit, they will usually put that profit into charities, and
Okay.
you can apply for those as a choir. Whenever we record a CD or we go on tour, we apply for grants, and that is also a very substantial amount of money we get out of that. So from those 3 income streams, we run our little choir business.
Now, does that fall under your responsibility as the conductor, or is someone else in the organization in charge of tracking down all that funding?
So this is different for every choir.
Yep.
I've made it so that every choir member is expected to sit in on a committee. So we have committees for everything. We have committees for clothes, we have committees for repertoire, and we also have the funding committee who applies for these grants. We have the committee for selling concerts. We have the committee for arranging parties for the choir. And with 45 people in the choir, you have to come up with a lot of committees for everybody to have something to do. But it's kind of cool because it makes the choir a little company. It's a little, we're really, all of the people are working towards a greater goal. And that is to make this choir as nice to be in as possible.
That's awesome. It's almost like a little, or it gives everyone ownership in the musical product, I would imagine, too, in a very unique way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well, Jonas, this has been really, really fun. Before we kind of officially wrap this up, is there anything about just want to make sure you get a chance to share any of those comparisons that you had thought about? Is there anything I didn't let you get to?
It might be a longer conversation, but I would love to hear your thoughts about the word blend. And because my understanding of the word blend is, as of right now, is a very negatively loaded word in the US choral conductor, community.
Yeah.
And I think I get why, but I would love to have this discussion with someone because I find it fascinating. I'm not I'm always telling my choirs to blend, and I know exactly what I mean by that. And that is to use your ears to blend into the common sound. And what I think American conductors mean by don't use the word blend is you should not sacrifice your own vocal health to produce a sound that is maybe not as vibrant. Would you agree with that statement, or is that too simplified?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am definitely in that category of somebody who doesn't like to use the word blend as a verb. So the way I explain it to my choirs is that blend is not a thing we do. Blend is a thing that we achieve if we are doing other things. So essentially I could break it down as simply for some of them as if we sing the right pitch at the right time on the right vowel, and then maybe even throw in some other qualifiers at the right volume or with with a matching sense of resonance or intonation or whatever it is, then blend is a thing that we will achieve. That will be the happy result of that. But I find that if you tell singers, especially young, untrained singers, I think that's where, because so many American conductors are school musicians in a training scenario, maybe that's where this attitude that you've come across could come from. Because I know that if I'm talking to a bunch of untrained singers, age 14, 15, 16, and I know this because earlier in my career, I used to do it, which is to say, all right, you guys, we need to blend. And then the result of that is that they tend to undersing, as in become almost barely phonating and barely making any sound at all because they're afraid to then stick out. They don't want to be like the one voice you hear. And then, of course, that spreads around the choir. And then suddenly you've got almost no noise coming out of the choir because they're all covering up their resonance so that no one can hear them. And so I think does that answer your question? It's kind of a way to think of that?
Absolutely. I think it's such an interesting question. I've put a lot of thought into it because I think it really reflects quite great how the cultural differences are, where I think you are not afraid in the US to kind of put yourself forward, put yourself out there, perform, bring your own voice to the choir, be a part of that vibrant sound. And it really creates that kind of vibrant and sometimes even soloistic sound. And that the sound I really connect with the US choral sound. And I find that really fascinating. And I would also be interested to see if I could do a blind test. Is it a choir from the US, from the UK, from Scandinavia, from wherever? And I'm ignorant enough to say that I think I would do great in such a blind test, because I think there is something in the US choral sound that is very special, very, very intriguing, and something I cannot ever imagining achieving with my choirs. And I'm keep coming back to that word blend, because for me that word of blending means to kind of hear the choir as one sound. That's probably what most of us are trying to achieve. But it also seems like many US choirs I've heard are trying to get the choral singer's own personality out through the performance. Do you know what I mean by that? So the
Yeah,
choral
no, I
directors
do
are
know what you mean.
encouraging
The individual expressivity to also be part of the choral experience. And I would definitely say that that's not true in all American choirs. There are different schools of thought depending on
of course.
the education of that director or the philosophy of that director. For me,
Yeah.
personally, it depends on the style of the music we're singing. So I would probably not have my students thinking that way to sing a piece by Thomas Tallis.
Obviously.
But if it was something, for example, we did a piece last year arranged by Craig Carnelia. It's called Flight for women's voices. And it's inspired by the musical theater style, but it's written for a choir. And so, of course, I'm definitely encouraging individual expressivity from each singer as if it's a solo, not only physically, but also vocally, but still trying to make sure we're singing the right note and the right vowel at the right time, and all those types of things.
I got a cat. Do you want to say hi to the world?
What's the cat's name?
She is called Mille.
Mille.
And she is, she's very cuddly.
That's awesome. Well, I would add one more thought then before we wrap up this conversation, and then although I could talk about this for a long time.
Me too.
I think this is just a theory, because I've thought about this a lot too, and in the United States, it kind of goes back to that cultural diversity thing we were talking about earlier. Singing, the timbre of the singing voice is not disconnected, or let me put it this way. I don't think we think enough how much it's connected to our linguistic heritage. So the way we speak impacts the way we sing. So for example, I don't think it's a coincidence that bel canto singing was invented by the Italians in the 1600s or 1500s. I think their language, their spoken language, takes the men, for example, up into the head voice and into the chest voice, and they have a sing-songy language linguistically.
For sure.
And so the way they're hearing themselves as a singer is going to be influenced by their spoken language. And that's true of cultures all over the world. And so, of course, in the United States, we have singers with almost infinite numbers of linguistic heritages. And so the timbres are going to also be very unique and interesting and not quite all matching. But in a country that is a little bit more homogeneity in terms of culture, like Denmark, that there would be, I would imagine, a different concept of even what it means to blend or to give up something. You're not giving up anything if everyone speaks the same language. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I've been thinking about this as well. We are always saying in Denmark, we are very envious of the Swedes, our neighbors, because their language are just so inviting for great singing vowels. And our vowels are just so far back. And I think that's a part of the reason why the Swedes have so many great choirs, and one of the reasons Erik Erikson could do what he did back then. And I think you're very, very right about the spoken language translates so much to the choral music. But then again, I think talking about blend, that could be interesting in that context, to see if you could blend the different, I don't know what terms to use here, but yeah, it can become a minefield when talking about this, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, because ultimately there has to be it's a metaphor for a blended society, I think, which is that there would have to be a compromise of vowel color.
Yeah.
In order to everybody would have to give up a little bit of the way their O normally sounds in order to make it to align, because the physics of it all will win in the end above our cultural ideas. But yes, Jonas, this has been a blast. I appreciate your perspective and sharing your warm-ups, of course, with us and your ideas about our choral cultures. This has been a great conversation, and I hope to continue it into the future.
Really, really happy that you're inviting international guests as well. I think the international dialogue is really important as well. So thank
Good.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one at Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course, now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.